of all, thank you so much for joining us on the panel today. It's going to be a very fun panel, and we're trying to make it as lively as possible. But let's get going with the introductions. If you want to go ahead and just share what you're doing with the audience in 30 seconds. Let's start with you.
I'll start. Like the introduction said, I've been in the startup space for nearly 20 years. I've worked inside companies. I've advised, I've consulted. Most recently spent 3.5 years investing on behalf of an entertainment company in Los Angeles. And I'm really passionate about diversity and equality within the tech ecosystem, all the way from board seats to LPs to venture capital to startup companies.
I'm one of 4 partners at a fund called Kindred. We're exactly 1 year old. We're 2 Brits, a Canadian American, 2 girls, 2 guys, a variety of operating and founding experience. And I do think that type of diversity within the group helps us to find and back a diverse range of founders, whether that's nationality or where they went to school or what type of sector they're operating in.
So 12 years ago, I ended my career as a founder of multiple companies in the Nordic region. I have been a CEO for in most of them. And I joined the VC community in Creandum, who had just started into 2004. And so 12 years ago, I began as a venture capitalist, invested in companies all over the Nordics and also outside the Nordics. A little while ago, I took the step out of the venture community or the venture firm and started angel investing. And I'm now building my own portfolio of companies. And I am doing a fund of fund to invest in European and Israeli venture capital firms.
That's awesome. And for those who don't know me, my name is Tugce, and I'm leading an organization called Angel Labs. So what we do is we focus on investor education, and we work with different countries, different economic development agencies to kickstart the venture capital and angel investing ecosystems around the world. So I think we have a very diverse group. So we represent 4 different regions and geographies in our investment community. So I want to get going with this question, especially with you two. So with all the different geographies and cultures Europe represents, do you think that the co-investment ecosystem is operating the way it should be, performing the way it should be? And I want to add on that, like, how do you think the Brexit will affect that down the road?
So I can start. Let me start with your last question first. I don't really think that Brexit will matter that much. Well, it remains to be seen, but I think that there will be a transition period before it's a real Brexit. But I'm very optimistic. There's too much dependency between what is going on in UK and the rest of Europe. So I think all parties will be interested in moving forward in a good way. So I don't think it will have that great implications to our part of the ecosystem. When it comes to the other part of your question, of course there's a challenges going forward when it comes to expanding our ecosystem, expanding our ecosystem in Europe out of these hubs that are there already into the rest of the Europe, trying to participate also on the global scene, trying to integrate those parts of the world that is not with us today. And this is also implying that we need to get more parts of, I'm a white, middle-aged, or maybe slightly more, male, who is maybe too typical for the industry that I'm representing. I need to see people that are different from me, because they are also a part of the ecosystem, and they will enrich the system that we are in.
Well, 5 years ago, when I was raising seed capital for my last business, the ecosystem was really different. It was much smaller, predominantly run by 90% white guys, 95% of whom had come from the financial services industry. 70% of those people were white, and there was some type of co-opetition, but there was very little innovation in terms of the people or the models that they were using. And now I think it's a far more vibrant ecosystem for venture, and I think that there's this co-opetition. I think lots of angel investors and funds working together locally and globally. And if we truly believe that global businesses can be built from anywhere and that the best entrepreneurs always have choice, then those of us that want to have the opportunity to back them need to be co-investing with the best globally and making sure that those founders have got choice. Because I guess we all know that to build a massively successful global business, it's a team sport, and making sure you've got the smartest people around the table gives you the best chance of that company going on to be really successful.
And I want to add on that. So you guys are very active in the European VC space, and we have all heard that European VC industry is lagging behind. There are numbers to prove that, but there's also a subjective feel to it. So do you really think that European VC is lagging behind?
Well, I think I have to admit that, if you compare us to Silicon Valley, who had a head start of maybe 20 years to Europe, yes, we are somewhat behind, but we are picking up quite rapidly. And I think that going forward, you will see more and more great companies coming out of this region, as we have seen. If you looked only 10 years ago, there were not that many. Now, only in Sweden, where I'm based, we see $1 billion company coming out there every second year. And it will be even more going forward.
Anything you want to add on that?
Different time, different background, different heritage. But one of the things that I think we're seeing more of now in Europe is entrepreneurs coming back around, doing the same thing 2 or 3 times, and being really inclusive and paying it forward, and being angel investors and taking risks and thinking about the upside and accepting failure. Over the last, especially 3 years, there's been a real change in that, and I'm excited to see that continue.
Yeah, and especially with your term, with your fund, one thing that's very interesting, you guys actually share the profit of the fund with the entrepreneurs you back. I just want to find out more about how you actually adopted that kind of a model, and what was the journey that was leading up to that? Because it's pretty innovative.
Yeah, the 4 of us had been angel investing for 3 years together, and last summer we decided that maybe the sum of the parts were greater than the individuals. And what we didn't want to do was lose that level of closeness that we had with the founders that we were working with. I guess we didn't want to be the Mayfair fund investing in the startup operating out of the windowless office in Shoreditch. We wanted to be in a partnership with the people that we backed. And as founders, all of us had recognized that the people that were most helpful to us when we were founding businesses were other founders. And so this sort of feeling of being equitable with the value created in the fund. And it has this amazing way of helping us to scale an inherently unscalable business model. So we invest at seed stage. We typically back teams of 1, 3, 5 people. And to meet them, most of the introductions are through other entrepreneurs. And actually, we can create this incentivized referral engine that once they're part of Kindred, then they're incentivized still to work with one another. Or at least that behavior exists anyway, and we're just being fair and equitable and sharing the value with them.
That's awesome. Really, really love the model. So let's go back to the diversity and inclusiveness aspect of venture capital. I want to start with you. So there is this recent research by PageMill, and it says out of the 100 top VC firms in the US, 40 of them don't have any female employees or partners to begin with. So why should we care about diversity, and why does diversity matter in venture capital? And also, we keep talking about this diversity issue. Can we go beyond acknowledging the problem and actually start seeing some solutions?
So I would say that diversity is not just the good or right thing to do, it's actually good business. So when you're talking about venture capital, there are many studies. I'll quote a Babson one, but First Round Capital actually did a study of all of their portfolio companies and had some really interesting statistics about how the female-founded companies outperformed. But there's a Babson study that actually says that out of a group of technology early-stage companies, women-led companies, 12% more on the revenue side, and I think it was 35 or 38% higher ROI. So this is a business about money and about numbers. And so I think the studies are proving this out. But I think it's not just in early stage companies. This is across all business. You want diverse people at the table for decision making. So I think that, again, it goes back to good, smart business and having diverse folks at the table. And I do think in the last 2 years, we've really been admiring the problem, and it's been in the press a lot, and all of that is wonderful. Unfortunately, there was a LinkedIn study that was recently released that actually said that 40% of people that they interviewed in the tech community thought that we were talking about diversity too much, and that it actually asked how many folks at your startup or your venture fund actually know of a plan in place to become more inclusive. And the numbers were like 20%. So that means that we might be talking about it a lot, but we still have a long way to go in terms of actually implementing action items for change. But I think that we are. I mean, there are a lot of people doing a lot of things, but it's still the very early days.
Anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, I think the Babson study is a great one. And Dow Jones has done a big review of different venture-backed businesses, and McKinsey, and they all come up with the same conclusions, that diverse teams are smarter and more innovative. But there's no study yet on diverse venture funds, because this industry behaves under a power law, and that absolutely is true in terms of fund managers too. And 97% of the returns in venture come from 3% of the fund managers. And they're all groups of white men. So there's nothing yet to say, there's no data, and this is a 10-year iterative cycle, so we haven't yet seen a diverse venture partnership produce market-leading returns, because there just hasn't been one yet. And I guess our hypothesis in a diverse team that we have is that we will beat the market, and that's what we strive towards as founders in our startup. But there's no data yet within investing that says it's true, but there is data that says that cognitive bias is real. So if there's a woman in an investing team, they're 3 times as likely to back a female CEO.
Right.
And they're twice as likely to back a gender diverse team. So we know that that's true. And we also know that venture investors are often on boards. Boards are a team. They're there for the founders to help them build their business. And creating diversity, including gender diversity within that, is super important.
And speaking of white men, as a stereotypical VC, you were sharing a very interesting anecdote with us previously. Would you mind sharing it with the audience as well?
So I have committed my sins, and I testified one to my colleagues here, and it is an example, and I would like to state before I tell you the story that I've taken my learnings from it. And I will never do it again. But there was this lady entering our Monday meeting in my venture capital firm, and she had a great case, a really good case. And we started asking questions, and she was located in the Nordics, which is a small market. And I asked her one of the questions I usually ask: where would be the best place to have this company? And she said, straight up, it's in Silicon Valley. Then I asked her a question I would never ask a male. I asked her, are you able to move? You have 3 or 4 children. Can you move to Silicon Valley just like that? And she looked at me and she said, yes. And now comes my sin. I didn't believe her. I just didn't believe her. And what happened? She moved. And she made great success. I have regretted it ever since. I missed a good opportunity. I was a typical white, middle-aged or somewhat more male who did a typical male question. I would never ask that question to a man. I'm sorry. I'm deeply sorry.
That's a really good story. So we talk about in Silicon Valley or in the US, we constantly talk about this diversity issue, but and it's represented as a global issue, which is somewhat true, but then when we travel around the world for business and speak at conferences, we actually meet a lot of women investors, a lot of women entrepreneurs, especially in Europe and Asia. So I wonder if it is actually more of an American problem rather than a global problem, and if in the US we're doomed, or if we can find a way to tackle that diversity problem.
I think,
Even
first,
here, when you look at the room and everyone we've been meeting.
I was going to say congratulations to Slush, because this is such a diverse conference. There's so many women here, and we've met people from Vietnam, and I met a woman today from Mozambique and Tanzania, and then of course all the Scandinavian countries. So for me, this is probably one of the most diverse conferences I've been to. I think that cognitive bias and unconscious bias are something that are global, and gender bias. But what I do believe, and we were talking about, sort of newer versus older ecosystems, that when it comes to Silicon Valley being sort of the eldest of the ecosystems, and New York sort of were all the guys that came out of the financial industry. And Silicon Valley is sort of the history of where tech started. I'm in Los Angeles, and in Los Angeles, the numbers are much improved in terms of the diversity of the overall landscape. Particularly for women, there's more female founders, there's more female investors. So I do believe that some of the newer and up and coming cities that aren't necessarily built on this old school pattern matching construct will have a little bit of an advantage to kind of get kickstarted with diversity and inclusion from the beginning. But again, cognitive bias and unconscious bias are things that, are global in nature. So I think, one of the things is that there are a lot of actions being taken in Silicon Valley in terms of, there's something called the board list. There's something called Project Include, which can help you with your culture and recruiting. There's a lot of tactical things happening, but, everyone says, well, how come we're not making great progress year to year? And that underlying unconscious bias and cognitive bias is behavior that takes a very long time to work through. And so it's great to be taking all of these action items, but that's why in Silicon Valley in particular, there's going to be a long road to improving the numbers.
Mm-hmm. And Tracy, you guys have a very diverse partnership. 2 men, 2 women, 2 Brits, 1 American, 1 Canadian, as far as I know. Do you think, so, and also there's high correlation between diverse partnerships and diverse portfolio teams, it's a fact. Do you think that diverse partnerships play a role in finding winning teams?
Absolutely. I think that having worked in a range of different sectors in a bunch of different countries, in SF, in New York, in Berlin, in London, in Shanghai, our networks are really diverse. At seed stage, you're investing mostly through personal referrals. So having this broad range of people that refer into us means we get a broad and diverse funnel of people in the first instance. I guess there's a bunch of research says that diverse teams go to facts more. And we do all have very different ways of thinking. And that enables us to come at problems from a different way, both in terms of making the investment decision and then also in terms of helping our companies to grow and not freaking out when things go a bit wrong, because we've had a diverse range of terrible experiences too.
Yeah.
But I suppose when we make an investment, it's not a consensus game, it's a conviction game.
Right.
But that means that we have to trust each other when we have conviction. So although there's a real diversity of all those headline things that you mentioned, there's a real commonality in terms of mission and the values that we have as people. And I think whenever you're thinking about diversity, in order to be productive and to make decisions at speed, you need some level of familiarity that binds you together.
Yeah, you kind of answered this question, but I guess I'm going to ask you two. So there was this recent study by First Run Capital, and it said women-led companies perform 63% better compared to male-led companies. So are you guys conscious about investing in minorities and women? Is it something that you get in your investment thesis or not really?
So I can take that first, since I confessed my sin earlier on. So my new fund, which is set up together with my partner Tugce Ergul, a great lady who used to be with EIF. We are very conscious about this, and you know I have been out fundraising in other circumstances as well, and I can sense that me and her together in a room fundraising, talking to investors or venture firms, we get a slightly different chemistry than what you do when you are just males in the room. I find this chemistry much better than when there's only one sex represented. So for sure, we are very conscious about it.
How about you? Was gender ever a factor for you when it came to investing?
I mean, gender is always a factor, I think.
I would say diversity, not just gender, but diversity in every way.
Yeah, I mean, I really try to invest in diverse founders, and personally, most of my angel investing has been for female founders because it's just a personal cause for me, and I think that I'd like to see, we need more women angel investing and investing at the early stages to actually jumpstart a lot of these female-founded companies, because I think it all works in a cycle. So I pay very close attention. Both to founding teams. I really love when there's a founding team that's a mix. I think it's a unique chemistry. But you know, certainly I'm at the end of the day, I'm just really looking for what I think is going to be a great investment.
Yeah. So we have only 2 minutes left, and I want to finish with this question that I'm going to ask to each one of you. So what do you think would be the consequences if we don't start taking action when it comes to diversity and inclusiveness in venture capital and entrepreneurship? What would the entrepreneurial world look like? And also, what can we do better to basically support an entrepreneurial ecosystem that nurtures all different players coming from diverse backgrounds?
So I think that we have been in a situation where, by and large, the 1% is creating for the rest of the world, and I constantly read articles on the democratization of technology, which is pretty interesting because when you have the 1% at the top, you're really not democratizing and serving the needs of everybody. So until we start to open the funnel this way, which is diversity on boards and LPs and investors, that will then inherently invest in, as the facts have shown and the stats have shown, a broader group of entrepreneurs, then you really actually are moving out the ability to say that you really have democratized technology up and down the funnel. And so I think that's where we need to get. I think that, you know, we have a long way to go, but I think that, you know, I'm starting to see progress that I hadn't seen even a few years ago. So I'm optimistic. And then, you know, on the female front specifically, you know, in the United States, I mean, we're a she economy. We are 85% of consumer purchasing, 60% of business purchasing. We're the majority of undergrad, graduate, and master's degrees. I mean, I could go on and on with those numbers. So I believe that it's inevitable that more women will be in all of these pipelines because of the sheer demographics and the purchasing power that we have. And just that we're powerful and we're fighting to help each other and sort of take a stand and really try to, you know, infiltrate all of these, you know, areas that we know we can be successful in. So on the positive side, I think that, you know, there isn't a chance that it's not going to happen. I think it's happening, and it's going to happen in fuller force.
So I think it's the wave has started. There are more and more now female entrepreneurs coming in, and you know, from the deal flow, we see more and more women. And these women, some of these women will inevitably be successful, and these successful women, they will become angel investors, and they will become venture capitalists, and so on. So I think, you know, the evolution will go on. Can we speed it up? Me, middle-aged male? Yes, we can, by encouraging more women to enter this scene, and by
encouraging more men to invest in those women.
Absolutely.
Well, I guess we know that there's a link between the gender of the investors and the gender of the entrepreneurs we back.
Right.
And when we're helping them to build out their senior leadership team, we're also often interviewing them, and you know, gender bias comes into play there, as does nationality bias, or you worked at that company, I worked there, or we both went to the same school together. You know, these things all come into play. So us being really aware of them, and then either building that into the structure of how we invest or the processes that we do are super important. But I guess from a selfish perspective, we're all, I'm sure, people that love to work within really vibrant, diverse cultures, and you never want to approach the same problem in the same way twice, and diversity enables that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. If I can get a big round of applause for our panelists. Thank you.